remember, but
Right.
I mean, some of it's been a little bit covered already. But
Don't worry
so
about
kind of
that, Jenny. Don't worry. I'll fill your boots.
Okay, well, just to try and draw a few threads together, you just mentioned about Venn diagrams. The
Yes.
reason that I called in was because I felt that around the time of the pandemic, there was this kind of evil trinity, if you like, which was people who were mask skeptics,
Yes.
people who were Brexiters,
Yes.
and people who had, very emotional they were all trying to inject us with killer molecules attitudes towards vaccines.
Yes,
And,
the
Venn diagram
absolute
for those
head
people-
cases. Just to be clear, you're describing people who tick all three of those boxes. You're not suggesting that all Brexiters are, for example, frightened of phone masts.
No, I'm not. But I'm suggesting that, there's a big overlap in
Yes.
the Venn diagram between those three
Yes,
circles,
I agree.
right? And you also mentioned Kemi Badenoch, and if you hadn't, then I would have said something about her, because what she said, this kind of appeal to common sense,
I know.
it's almost like a dog whistle for people like that. It's the kind of Michael Gove, we're not interested in listening to experts anymore.
Yes.
Which is why we ended up coming out of the EU, and the day after the vote, people say, well,
What's that
I
about?
didn't mean it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to sort of tell them that I don't want to be pushed around and I don't want to be told what to do. And I think people's concept of, I don't want to wear a mask because it makes me look like a chump, it makes me look like someone who's doing what they're told, and, people using the expression sheeple.
You're right.
Is similar to people's attitude towards this kind of very, very nebulous concept of sovereignty. Nobody can actually define it or what it means. It's more just it exists on a very, very emotional level. And I think...
And that's
Kemi
what
Badenoch
this is a brilliant analysis.
invoking common sense
Yeah.
is a dog whistle for those people who are sort of, well,
I know
don't
better.
care about your bits of paper. I've got a PhD from the University of Life.
That's also, if we were to extend the Venn diagram slightly, they're probably more likely to be out painting roundabouts at the weekend than the rest of us are. Can I ask what you do for a living, or what your sort of perspective on this is?
Well, yeah, I'm a doctor, and I worked in accident emergency during the pandemic.
Oh, Lord, I'm not laughing at what you did during the pandemic. I'm just laughing at the idea that a doctor, somehow in our ludicrous Brexit Britain, is set up in opposition to the leader of the Conservative Party when it comes to what we should do in the context of potential health crises. Who are you going to listen to? Yeah.
Another thing about what
I told you to fill your boots, Jenny. You've taken me very literally. I'm enjoying
sorry.
this. No, carry on.
I'll clear off and let someone else have a say if you want. But another thing is, how utterly ridiculous to use a word like traumatised about having to wear a mask. I'm just going to mention two things, okay?
Please,
so
yes,
I worked in accident emergency during the pandemic, and I can genuinely say I do feel slightly traumatised by some of the experiences I had. I had to telephone people and tell them that their spouse of, nearly 50 years wasn't going to make it through the weekend, and no, they couldn't come in and see them because of the restrictions. And I still struggle, actually, with thinking about those conversations that I had to have. And, there was an immense amount of trauma that was suffered by the British public during the pandemic for all sorts of reasons. Traumatised is not being able to arrange a funeral for your mother, not being able to hold her hand while she's dying because she's dying of COVID. It's not wearing a mask for other people's benefit.
I was so busy finding her ridiculous that I forgot to find her disgusting.
Well, it is disgusting. I think it's disgusting. You and I have spoken once before, and this was about the coronation, and actually you put it on YouTube, so I think you liked my call then. But one of the reasons I've been less active on LBC is because in the intervening 2 years, I've had a high-risk cancer, which I was treated for with 12 months of treatment, including chemotherapy, surgery, radiotherapy, the works. I'm not going to say what it was, and I don't want to frighten anybody, but there was a paper that was published in a very respected medical journal. I think it was Nature, it may have been The Lancet at the end of June or July, which basically said that the type of cancer I got, if you're treated for primary cancer, which is cancer that hasn't spread beyond the organ it originated in, catching COVID or catching flu can actually activate dormant cancer cells in the lungs and give you incurable disease. So I'm terrified.
Of course you are.
I don't want to. I've caught COVID. I've had COVID 3 times, actually. I had it once right at the beginning of the pandemic. I had once after the vaccines, and I had it once earlier this year, actually, in the spring. But, I'm genuinely worried about, I used to catch things occasionally, and flu is really nasty, and people don't realise how nasty
Really
it is.
horrible.
And it's really important to protect other people who are more vulnerable, who are more likely to suffer sort of complications and, really serious adverse consequences because of flu. We can't always see from looking at people, what their state of health is. And there are an awful lot of people going around who are particularly vulnerable to being really laid low and knocked back by a nasty bout of flu. It's just a no-brainer to wear a mask. It protects other people. And I really would urge anybody who's got symptoms, particularly if they've got fever, flu symptoms, just stay away from other people. And for goodness sake, wear a mask and limit contact.
Thank you. I mean, thank you for everything, but thank you for this call. And when I say everything, I mean what you did during the pandemic and the reminder of what traumatic experiences involve in the real world as opposed to the Badenoch universe, where not even having to, or just simply wearing a mask in order to protect other people from hideous illness is somehow traumatized. Isn't she one of the people that uses the word snowflake as a pejorative, or that talks about other people not being tough enough, traumatized by a face mask? Jenny, thank you, and I hope your recovery continues. I really do. I covered an awful lot of ground, but you covered it in quite spectacularly expert fashion. So thank you again. It's 11:02.